At 5 in the morning last Saturday, early birds and party animals alike were met with a very strange sight. They would have seen me repeatedly chucking rocks at the ground, picking fights with bins and swiping at a tree while filming it all on a handheld camera. You see, I couldn't sleep. I guess that I was busy thinking about the game and had decided that what it needed was oomph. My early morning antics were to get some decent sound samples to ensure that my game's crumbling rocks and splattering bodies sounded just right. I made it so that boulders would roll across the ground or shatter if landing from a height. If a rock wall was damaged but not destroyed, it would eventually crack, releasing dust and yet more physics-based debris. You'd have thought I was addicted to Red Faction or something. This all sounds like a bad joke, doesn't it? With a project this short, most people would, quite rightly, be working hard on the core gameplay for the project rather than wasting time on graphical effects. But there is reason to my madness. On the first day I said that this competition isn't really about making a great game. PewDiePie's been involved with past competitions on the site, and he himself has said that it's about making games which are fun to watch. As far as I'm concerned, this game will have about 30 seconds to impress before people lose interest and move on to something else. I need something to keep people hooked, and the exploding showers of Maltesers serve that purpose beautifully. It's something I've skimped on in the past and they've suffered as a result. Shoot a bad guy into Ragnaromine and it sounds, and looks, boring. Nothing happens, there's no feedback. Deathgiver 2 in comparison rewards you with showers of blood, flailing bodies and splattery sound effects. With this game I aim to take it to the next level. Unfortunately my early morning antics were mostly wasted since there were better, royalty-free samples available online. None of them had the oomph that I needed on their own, but when mixed together with other ones I ended up with some really meaty sounding impacts. I didn't think it worked this way, but I'm really pleased it does. These bombs were now even more fun to use. So fun in fact that I thought it was a shame to ration them. This was perhaps the big turning point of this project. I gave the player unlimited bombs to use and abuse. It's the one change that suddenly made it fun, and yet it goes against everything that we've been taught in games. What's next? Guns without reloading? The ability to fly? Actually, guns reloading is the perfect example. It's a given that we reload in games. If you don't include it, people will moan. They'll say that it adds depth to the gameplay. Maybe, just as rationing mines did with this project. But it didn't make it fun. Weapon downtime works well in some genres, but I don't think it's a fun mechanic. I've noticed that with GTA 5 it's actually steered away from this. Your weapons sort of need reloading, but it's barely noticeable and is completely automated, allowing for you to focus on the shooting, which is definitely the fun part. And when the end result is so enjoyable, who cares? I feel like a better game developer now than I was at the start of this project, just for considering unlimited mines to be a possibility. But with unlimited mines, I had to yet again change how the gameplay worked. Allowing the player to throw the mines across the levels like grenades was more enjoyable. I tried grid-based movement at one point, but it felt limiting and blocky, so I quickly returned to the free move option. Having unlimited mines is a difficult gameplay feature to balance. I mean, there's nothing that can stop players from blasting through the level to the finish line. I didn't want there to be, that's what made the game fun, but there still had to be a challenge. Instead of working out how to get to the end of the level, I shifted the game's scoring system to be about damage and time. You now had to reach the finish line as quickly as possible while still in one piece. I later settled on two gameplay modes, speedrun and destruction. This would let players get a high score in different ways by changing how the score was allocated. Speedrun scoring is 80% based on time, 10% on destruction and 10% remaining health. Destruction is 80% destruction, 10% time and 10% health. I thought that it was important to keep it as a weighted mixture rather than just 100% of one gameplay type, as a mix opens up more gameplay possibilities to separate a good score from an excellent one. Imagine if destruction was 100% about blowing things up. How could the game tell between two players who had completely destroyed everything? That's where the 10% time comes in. Likewise, even if you're speedrunning, trying to cause as much damage and debris while you're at it as possible will make it more exciting and risky, and will raise the skill ceiling higher. I struggled with how timing should be rated. I don't know how quickly people will be able to manage each level, so I decided to have the perfect time for each level at 0 seconds. This means that no one will ever be able to manage a perfect score in this game, since it always takes at least a bit of time to complete it, but this method made more sense than the alternatives. For some reason, after all the gameplay decisions I had been making, allowing the player's mines to hurt the player was the one that felt counterintuitive. How dare the player's weapon be able to hurt them? It's as if they're being betrayed and punished for using their own tool. I left this damage in, but I still don't 100% like it when I get caught in a mines blast for the reasons mentioned previously. But there had to be more that could damage the player than just that. And there was. Since there was so much debris flying about the level, why not make that hurt as well? This was perfect. That pointless graphical effect had now become crucial to gameplay. How hadn't I thought of this sooner? My younger self was so stupid. This meant reducing how many were flying across the screen to make it possible to avoid them. The shadows for the rubble originally went off at a 45-degree angle like the rest of the shadows, but I changed it so that they remained directly below the debris so that you could easily see if you were about to be crushed. I don't mind sacrificing graphical realism or ammo constraints in exchange for better and less frustrating gameplay. Fun trumps all. And those wooden crates? At the moment they're just something that you can easily blast through. They're no fun at all. So why not make them fire out splinters? Wow, so the stone walls rain damage down from above you, and the wooden ones bounce about at ground level. This is becoming beautifully chaotic. All it took then was to balance the damage. And I made some pretty aggressive decisions. Boulders landing on your head would take off a quarter, but it happened so infrequently that I ended up not caring. The dirt boulders in the final game are still like this, you can see how harmless they felt, but I made concrete boulders an insta-kill, and I regret nothing. It worked better than I had expected, since it's totally up to you when you choose to blow up the walls, and you only have yourself to blame if you then try to rush past them as they're still exploding. There's a real thrill to running to the end with the insta-kill blocks landing all around you. Splinters only take off about 1/8 of your health, but they're evil. They will get a reputation for being unfair. They will chase you down and make their attack feel personal, and they will get you just as you're about to finish the level. They're so random and unpredictable, I clench my butt super tight whenever a wooden crate gets blown up. But you can choose to hide somewhere safe when they blow up, and unlike the insta-kill boulders, walls will protect you. Both of these gameplay mechanics implement risk and reward. You have to reach the ending quickly, but have to weigh that against being killed along the way. The game encourages gambling. For this competition, you're not allowed to use stuff that you've made previously, but there's a big flaw to this. I have experience. You know those 3D Malteser fountains? I had discovered how to do this several years ago. I made it again for this project, but it only took a fraction of the time because I knew how to do it and avoided a lot of the playtesting that's involved in figuring it out for the first time. The shadow and boulder are completely separate. They have no way of communicating with each other. This could be a disaster, but it works because they start with the same direction, velocity and so on, then rely on the consistency of the computer to keep them in sync. The shadows are another example of experience. If I had made the shadows semi-transparent objects, they'd all overlap and some bits would be darker than others. Instead, they're just a big black silhouette of the model and are put onto a semi-transparent layer behind the one that you're playing on, but still in front of the grass texture. It's that layer that's transparent, not the shadows. It's just a graphical effect, but it's amazing how much it adds to the experience. This, combined with how quickly you can make things in a game maker such as Fusion 2.5, allow for me to make a game in 3 days that would take much longer if attempted by somebody with less experience or with a more difficult game making tool. And I've added to my experience with this project. I accidentally made the flying boulders look better by mistake. I made 4 different images to add variety and stored them all as different directions to keep them separate from each other. I forgot about this and made the images rotate in the air to make them look as though they were rolling. The result was that they jumped between the different pictures as they spun round, which by chance all look like the same bit of debris but from different angles. Seems as though you can get away with a lot with this method, and it looks awesome. It's definitely something I'll be using in the future. This was all done by midday. Watching me work, it doesn't look as though I do anything with the rest of it, but I was. I was endlessly replaying the level and fixing any bugs that I could find. These don't have to be mistakes either. I actually made the game more buggy in some places. For example, every time a boulder landed, it would make a smashing sound. This was overwhelming when there was a lot of action on screen, and it was getting in the way of more important sounds, such as the explosion itself or any splat sounds from the player getting hurt. I changed it so that less important samples only play if they aren't already being played. The result is that some impacts don't make a noise, but you don't really care because your ears are busy listening to the more important things instead. But yeah, small things like this go a long way towards ensuring that the game itself is solid and reliable to play. About 90% of making a game is this invisible bug testing stage, or about 10% for Arkham Knight. In fact, I love this illusion with game design. Anybody watching will be like, dude, you're 2/3 through a competition and you still haven't made a single level. But really, I'm saving time by not making them. It might take a minute to fix a bug with a single level. If I had 4, it could take more than 4 times as long to fix. I could make a mistake and not fix one properly and only realise later on once the problem had grown even bigger. I want to talk about this another time since it's a very important part of game design, especially for larger and more complicated projects. There is a solution, but I didn't have time to implement a level editor into this 3-day competition. So, with just 1 day remaining, I had myself a working, solid prototype of the game's engine. All I have to do now is to add the menu, high score system, and all of the levels that this game will need. Oh, and I'll have to playtest and polish it all as well. Easy.